This webinar is brought to you by Admit Advantage. Admit Advantage is a leading global admissions and career consulting company founded by the same people who built AdmitMe. Visit admitadvantage.com for more details.
So, some perspectives, and you all see the things, but I'll read through them. This is the inside scoop on what people from HBS say about HBS. So one student said, the case studies have taught me how to make good decisions with imperfect information, similar to what I will have to do as a leader of a company. And again, as I mentioned, when you're doing case studies, you are the protagonist. You're in the protagonist's shoes. You have to make assumptions about the environment in order to make a decision. And I will say, having been out of Harvard Business School for 8 years, it definitely replicates decisions that you have to make in the real world. One alum says, I've never seen the kind of diversity across nationality, professional goals, methodology, hobbies, and income wealth that I saw at Harvard. One of the pluses that I found in being in a very large graduate school program is that you do have a little bit of everything. Pretty much every nationality is represented. And for me, being curious about other career paths, I knew going to a school that had a vast alumni network that I could tap into would be helpful for me. Another student said, the cases have presented a vehicle to really understand the thinking of the broadest array of experts and leaders I've ever met, my classmates. So Harvard Business School, and again, I'm an alum, so I'm slightly biased, but it's a magnificent program, and you really do meet people that have already made great accomplishments in their career and will go on to make great accomplishments. Even from my year, I have some classmates who are now entrepreneurs and are doing pretty well. Everyone's not an entrepreneur. Myself, for example, I did take off some time to give it a try, but I'm back in corporate. And just the variety of fields that we've all gone into, it's very interesting to watch everyone develop and grow upon graduation. Again, I do want to say, if you have any questions, feel free to message them in the chat box or the question box, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So the strength of the MBA program at Harvard Business School relies upon a diverse student body from all walks of life, all industries and functions, and all ways of thinking. So we can look at the business school program from the perspective of leadership, it being analytical, and then the sense of community. So HBS, especially with the case study method, is very collaborative. Half of your grade is determined based on your class participation, which we calculated when we were there. That's speaking in about every second or third class. Sometimes you may have an opinion. You're like, this is a great opinion. This is what I would do if I were the protagonist, right? And the professor calls a classmate of yours and they say that exact idea. And now you're like, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to be participating, but someone just said what I was going to say. HBS for me did a really good job of teaching me how to think from the opposite perspective. So even though in my core, I believe that the protagonist should do A, can I use the data presented to me in this case study to build the opposite case and look at it from the opposite point of view and say, you know what, he shouldn't do A because of this. And that's something that has really helped me professionally since graduating. In terms of analytical, it comes with an aptitude and appetite for analytics. So it's fast-paced, it's data-loving. However, I will say, having an engineering degree, for me, it wasn't as analytical as my undergrad was. And that was just because we had lectures and problem sets. And again, going back to the case study method, which is a big piece of the core of HBS, you're taught finance by cases. So while there will be moments in class where your professor is on the board writing out formulas and doing math, it's taught in a very different way. So the way that you approach analytics is very different at HBS than it would be in a class where you have lectures. And in terms of leaders, wherever you lead, show your potential to be a strong leader in the business world. So you're going to be in class with a lot of other brilliant minds, and how do you stand out? Even though everyone's brilliant, and sometimes that can be intimidating, everyone is there because they bring their own unique set of qualities, their unique strengths, and their unique passions. And that's very evident in the classroom. So, one alum said, one reason I chose HBS was for its beautiful campus. The opportunity to live and work among my classmates while having a campus to ourselves created a great atmosphere for collaboration and bonding. This is not my quote, but I feel like I could have said it myself. Something that definitely attracted me to HBS was its campus. One thing I recommend to everyone considering a graduate program, whether it be an MBA or a master's in science, etc., is visit the school that you're interested in prior to applying. It'll prove you with so much insight and so many experiences to draw from in your essays that I think it really makes a difference. So for me, I visited a couple of business schools, and what stood out to me about Harvard was its campus. Harvard Business School has its own campus to itself. The majority of the people on campus are your 927 classmates. All of your classes are with other MBA students, with the exception of a few people that cross register from the law school, the Kennedy School of Government, other graduate school of the arts. So the campus is to yourself. You do not have classes with undergraduates, which appeal to me because I'm working on my master's. So I didn't necessarily want to be in classes that people earning their bachelor's are getting because I've already done that. And the facilities are very nice. Baker Library, gorgeous. There's a fitness center on campus. Most students live in either the dorms or on campus apartments, and your class is just a short walk away. So for me, that was a plus, especially in building that community. One student said, HBS is part of a growing Harvard community and campus, but it has its own luxurious facilities, which I just mentioned, from stately traditional buildings representing its history to a top-of-the-line gym, a dining hall that rivals the Whole Foods prepped meal section, and an underground tunnel system that allows students who live in dorms to avoid the Boston winter entirely. So the dormitories, I'll talk about that briefly. Not most people's first choice, because some of the dorms, I will say, can be small. If you've ever been on a cruise ship and you know how small cruise cabins are, the dorms are very similar. And you enter the dorms through a lottery. So I was lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, enough my first year to get Chase Hall. My room was tiny, twin bed that if I'm sitting on the bed and I reach my hand out, I could touch the end of my desk, which was up against the other wall. Shower small, but the one great thing about the dorms is they're more affordable and they are connected to the underground tunnel system. So I could literally go to the basement level of my dorm, walk through a tunnel, cut under the main lawn, and end up right in Aldrich Hall where my classes were. So that was really nice, especially when the winters are brutal. And also in the dorm, you do get another opportunity to have another sense of community. And I didn't have a roommate, so that was nice. Sometimes people that live in the apartments on campus, they may have roommates, and I didn't have any. I see questions are coming in. Thank you guys. We're almost through the presentation, so I'll get to those shortly. So one alum said the HBS RC experience was great. It provides a safe atmosphere to contribute to the case study discussions and gives students the opportunities to build small program relationships in one of the largest full-time MBA programs out there. So I have a confession. I'm the alum that gave this quote. And again, I do know that the size of Harvard Business School can be intimidating to some. 928 students, it's like, how do you network? How do you make friends? How do you know all your classmates? The short answer is you won't know all of your classmates, but you will know the 90 people in your section, all of RC year, which is the first year, very, very well. And you leave having that network of 90 people that you can rely on, that you can reach out to, in addition to the friends that you make outside of the section. So although the size can be intimidating, they definitely have things in place to give you the opportunity to build a community. In addition to your section, you also have learning teams. And your learning teams are about 5 to 6 people. And these are cross-section teams. So you won't be on a learning team with anyone else from your section. And they're designed to be your built-in study group. So every morning before class, you'll go into the library or the cafeteria, and there are learning teams everywhere going over their assignments for the day. So, for example, if class were to start at 9, you might meet with your learning team at 8 and eat breakfast as you guys discuss the cases so that you're in a better position when you get to your class to contribute to the class. Because your learning teammates have already given you a little taste of the different perspectives you can have on a certain case, and then you bring that added knowledge to the classroom. So it's a really great structure. So other schools to consider that have great things to offer, like HBS, Stanford. Stanford has a similar application pool, and they're also very selective. The different thing about them is they have a very much smaller class size, I believe in the 300s, so about a third, if not less than that. And they prize innovation. Stanford, especially with its location being in Silicon Valley, you are a lot closer to a lot of tech companies. But if you are considering HBS, there are a lot of HBS alums that work in tech companies such as Google's and the Facebooks. And because the class size is so large, there will always be someone somewhere you want to be. Columbia is another school to consider, also located in a city, in New York City as opposed to Boston. So if you do want to live in New York City after business school, going to Columbia could smoothen that transition because you have the opportunity to network with employees and executives at companies based in New York. It's city-centric culture, and it also has a smaller class size. One thing I've learned from having friends that have gone to Columbia Business School and being an admissions consultant is that whereas at HBS, you typically do not work while you're going to school, at Columbia, there are students that will take on part-time internships during the school year. And that's in part to Columbia being at the very center of business. And if you have looked at the Columbia application, one of the essay questions talks about how will you take advantage of being at the very center of business? And that's one way you can. Wharton is another similar school in terms of academics, just being really well known for the academic rigor of the program. However, Wharton tends to be more known for analytical subjects like finance. So if you're really interested in finance, Wharton is a good place to go. If you're not interested in finance, but you come from a liberal arts background and you want to deepen your knowledge of finance, that could also be a good place to go. It also has a large class size, I believe around the 700s, and they're also a top 10 school. They mix their learning style with case studies and experiential learning and lectures. So there you won't be learning your quant classes like finance case study. It will be lecture style. So one good thing to know as you look at different business schools is understand how you learn, and see what best fits you. But again, if you do visit the campuses, you'll have the opportunity to sit in on the class and really see firsthand how that learning experience is for you. The application, this is the fun part. Before you start, you want to know your personal brand, what differentiates you, and you want to paint a clear picture of your dream. I liken the business school application process as you writing a book. So let's say there are 35 of us here. All 35 of us can read the same book and read the same description of what the main character looks like. But to each of us, the main character can look totally different. And why is that? That may be because the author wasn't very specific about what they look like. If I said, oh, the main character, Saundra, is a woman in her 30s, she could be a white woman, she could be a black woman, she could be Latina, she could be Asian, her hair could be straight, it could be curly, and we all will use our own life experiences or imagination to project what we think this woman in her 30s named Saundra would look like. Now, if I'm the author and I wanted everyone to envision that same thing, I would give them the same description, right? So she's a woman in her 30s, around 5'6", medium build, chocolate, or not chocolate, caramel complexion, curly hair. And then what we envision that person to look like would be similar. So I always say when you write your essays, you want to paint a clear picture of why an MBA from that school and what you want to do post MBA, both in the short and long term. If you're very vague and you're like, I want to work in consulting, then you're leaving it up to whoever's reading your application to fill in what they think that means for you versus I want to work in consulting for a company such as with a focus on or in a specific industry. In terms of, and I'm working backwards here, differentiation, I oftentimes have clients ask me, okay, what do the admissions officers want to hear? And I always react to that so negatively. It's not about what the admissions officers want to hear. All schools and all admissions committees want you to be authentic. They want to know your authentic self. If you want to go to business school so that you can teach art classes, I don't necessarily know the connection, but be honest. And as an admissions consultant, it's my job to help you make that connection because your passion about art education is going to shine through way more than if you lied and said, I want to be in private equity. Because you know what? There's hundreds of other and thousands of other people that are going to say they want to go in private equity, but they're going to be passionate about it, so their stories are going to stand out. Don't rely on your numbers. Unfortunately, with schools like HBS that have 11% admissions rate, there are going to be people that have 780 GMATs, 3.8 GPAs from engineering programs from really rigorous schools that don't get in. And you might be like, whoa, but they had everything that, and it fit the class profile, but maybe they didn't tell their story right. Maybe they didn't let that passion shine through. Maybe they didn't put a lot of thought into who they were and what their personal brand is and what they want to do with their MBA. I always give my clients the advice, again, be very specific of what you want to do because you're up against other people that will name specific classes that are necessary for their advancement in the fields they want to go into. And if you're just like, I don't know what I want to do, but I just want to learn, it's going to be hard to compete against the person that knows exactly what they want and they've done the research on what they want. Granted, whatever you write about in your application, Harvard Business School is not going to come back to you 10 years after you graduated and say, hey, David, in your essay, you said you wanted to be a consultant, but now you're running a nonprofit. We got to take our degree back. That's never going to happen. So you just have to pick something when you write your essays and be very clear about that. And then going back to personal brand, understand what 3 to 5 characteristic traits you want to exhibit. What makes you you? What are your strengths? How have you grown professionally? If you've only been at a company 3 years, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to have gotten promoted multiple times because that may not be the career trajectory of your position or at your company, but just show how you've grown. In terms of community, this isn't like applying to undergrad schools where you had to be in a whole bunch of extracurriculars, but I do think business schools appreciate seeing that you do stuff outside of work. So it may not be volunteering at a local organization for the past 3 years. It could be you're passionate about running, and maybe 3 years ago you couldn't run a mile and now you're running marathons. They just want to know who you are because business school is a very, very social type of program. And especially with a case study when you're talking, they want people that are going to get along with other people and they want to know who you are, what your interests are. So when you're admitted and they build those sections, they really do have diversity, not just across nationalities and ethnicities and professional backgrounds, but also personal interests. So that's what I would have to say you really want to hone before you start. Knowing who you are, your personal brand, being authentic and being true to yourself and what it is you want to do and what you want to do with that MBA, painting a clear picture so nobody else can tell your story and it not be told right. Tell your story right so that everyone reads it and believes in you. So an admissions officer said, highlighting your desire to make an impact in classroom discussions and leveraging your background from an academic, personal, and professional perspective in this effort will position you well. I couldn't agree more, especially again, and I keep saying case study method. I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but you're contributing to your classroom, right? You're contributing to classroom discussions. Are you going to be that person that builds up your classmates? Or are you going to be that person that, no, you're wrong. This isn't how you do it, right? So everything that you discuss in the case studies, you always have to bring an aspect of personal experience into it. So you might work at a newspaper, right? Which is probably not many people in the class probably came from a publishing background, but you might have a case about someone who's starting their own publication. You can bring in so much valuable experience from your time at this publishing company that none of your classmates would have. And you're adding value not only to the discussion, but to the development of your classmates. So you always want to bring that personal aspect in. I think that's one thing that really makes HBS special. So the overview for the application. The round one application deadline has passed, but no fret. Round two, which is the most common time to apply and where the most seats are offered, is January 4th, 2019. As most programs right now, you need 2 recommendations. They must be submitted online. So how this works is when you start filling out your online application, they'll ask you for the name and the email address and title of who your recommenders will be. Once you enter that in, it'll automatically send them the recommendation form. That recommendation form consists of a grid of skills that they rank. Okay, this candidate really exhibits this candidate doesn't have it at all. And then answering 2 questions. The questions for most business school recommendations tend to be, tell us along the lines of, tell us why this student is amazing compared to their peers. And oftentimes they'll also ask, tell us about a time where you gave the applicant constructive criticism. How did they take it and how did they learn from it? One thing I always recommend to do is syncing with your recommenders prior to them writing the recommendation so that those characteristic traits that are going to be a part of your personal brand, they can speak to. And when they get to the question about, tell us about a time where you gave them constructive criticism, that the thing that you're boasting about in your essays isn't the thing that they're like, oh, Pauline needed to work on time management, but Pauline in her essays is raving about how great she is at time management, right? So you always want to sync with your recommenders and make sure you're on the same page. There's also one essay. One essay is tough. I will say that. When I applied many, many moons ago, 11 years ago, I had 6 essays, and that was also tough. But it gave me 6 different opportunities to share different pieces of myself, where now you have one essay, and that essay can take so many different forms. There's no right, there's no wrong. You can do a traditional essay about why an MBA, why now, or you can do an essay about what motivates you, what's most important to you, or you can do an essay about how you want to change the world. There's just so many ways that you can approach it. And I think, again, at the end, just being authentic and true to yourself is what's going to really make your essay shine. There's no length for the essay. However, if I had to give you some advice, I would say do not go over 1,000 words, maybe even 750 words. Why? When you only have one essay and you want to say so many things, I always say be considerate of the admissions committee. They are reading thousands of essays, and the longer your essay is, the higher likelihood that they may start losing interest before they get to the end, right? So you want to make every word count. You want to be succinct. You want to be concise, but you want to get across who you are. But you also don't want to lose the admissions officer who's reading it along the way. You want to keep them captivated. You also have to submit a resume. A standard business resume or CV is accepted. I don't think that Harvard requires it to be one page, but I highly, strongly, very much so recommend that your resume only be one page. Given that you probably have between 2 and 6 years of work experience, there's no reason your resume should be more than that. And when you get to HBS, they make everybody redo their resume in their format, and their format is one page. So I would stick to one page. If you get an interview, they're invite only. You can conduct that on campus or off campus, depending on where you live. I would always say, if you can, do it on campus, especially if you have not visited the campus before, because you can arrive a day early, sit in on a class, and really get that experience and get that insight that you can then share in your interview. After the interview, and this is relatively new, you have 24 hours to write a reflection on that interview and submit it online. So just make sure that whenever you're leaving the interview, that within 24 hours you will have time set aside and you will have a very good internet connection for you to submit that post-interview reflection. You don't want that to be the reason that you don't get admitted. The essays. So I spoke about this previously, so I will do this, just roll over this quickly so we have time for questions. Be authentic. Don't write what you think they want to hear. Write about your passions, write about what motivates you, write about your interests, write about what makes you special. Discuss your values. So this is a great opportunity to share more than one anecdote about yourself. While you might have a really, really great accomplishment, think about, what values and strengths did I exhibit to get this accomplishment? And then look back at your life and say, are there other moments in time that I've exhibited this? Or are there other moments in times that I've had this motivation? And if so, maybe I can show them a theme of how this is a core of who I am and how I will then take this value or this characteristic to be successful in the future once I leave HBS. You also want to fill in the gaps. So there are optional essays, and I say only write an optional essay if you need to. Examples for needing to write an optional essay is you might have had an employment gap. Your GMAT score, you may feel, does not reflect your abilities or aptitude. Maybe on your resume, it doesn't show that you got promoted, but you did take an increase in responsibilities, or maybe you weren't promoted because they laid off people or they got rid of positions and there was no room to grow, but you took on additional stuff. If you do not ask your current supervisor for a recommendation, that is something I would address in the optional essay. Oftentimes, depending on where you work, it's not uncommon. You may not feel comfortable asking your direct supervisor for a recommendation because it could affect your career trajectory at that company between then and when you get accepted, if you get accepted. So, for example, you may not want to say in October, hey, boss, write me a recommendation, and risk the chance of being passed over for other opportunities or a promotion because they think you're leaving. A lot of companies are not like that. And if you have a really good relationship with your boss, I would not fear that. But if you're in that situation, you would know. That's not to scare anyone. People that are in that situation, it's very clear, and they have to say that. You also want to keep it short, which I just mentioned. Don't abuse there not being a word limit. Admissions committee people are people too, and they will get bored and they will lose interest, and you don't want that to happen. Now, they will read your whole essay, but can't guarantee their level of engagement. So, if you do get invited to interview, as I mentioned, on campus is encouraged. Skype is an option if you're international, and you can also do in-person interviews in select cities across the world. Once you get invited for an interview, there's like an interface that you can go on and schedule it, and all that is made clear at that point. They take about a half an hour, and the interviews are personalized and tailored to you. However, if the interviewer is going down a list asking you question, don't be alarmed. My interview felt very unnatural, very forced, but my interviewer let me know at the beginning, we only have 30 minutes. I have about 8 questions I want to ask you, and I want to make sure I get through them. And that was fine. There wasn't a lot of time for just shooting the breeze or talking because everyone that gets interviewed at HBS, the person interviewing you has read your whole application. They know everything about you, and they're going to take this interview to dig a little bit deeper into who you are and get to know you better. So I had a friend, for example, I think that wrote about studying abroad or traveling abroad to a certain region during a significant time that something significant happened, and the interviewer like asked, how was it being in this country during this time? And I know it definitely caught him off guard because he wasn't expecting them to get that personal, but they're very personalized. So you just want to make sure, this is another reason why in your essays you want to be you and you want to be authentic, because if you're not, you will get found out at the interview. What to talk about? Focus on real world business scenarios, real experiences that you've had, and work towards a tangible outcome. So if they ask you, and some questions can be very much like an interview, tell me about a time where you faced a challenge. Don't just talk about, oh, this is how I faced a challenge, but talk about what you learned from that experience and how that's made you a better person now.
Admit me, never apply alone.